Okay. So we'll go ahead and get started. Sorry for the delay there. And when we get started, just a second, we'll be starting in chapter 20. Matthew chapter 20. Before that, to get us sort of caught up, we stopped at the chapter break. But even though there's a chapter break at the beginning there of chapter 20, it's not really a break in what Christ is talking about. So he's sort of continuing in chapter 20, talking about what he started talking about in 19. So to get us sort of caught back up, he had just been talking about, he had just been addressed by a young man who came up to him. And again, we're reading St. Matthew's version now. So there's other versions, the other Gospels. But a young man who came up to him and asked him what good thing he needed to do to inherit eternal life. And Christ asked him about keeping the commandments. He said he had kept all of them from his youth. So he said, sell everything you have and give it to the poor and come be my disciple. And we're told that the young man went away sad because he had a lot of possessions. And he wasn't willing to give them up, even in exchange for eternal life, apparently. And so this then led to Christ talking about how difficult it could be for the wealthy to be saved. And then the disciples asked, in particular St. Peter, who's usually the one to pop up and be the volunteer spokesman for what everybody's thinking, to blurt it out. Said, well, what about us? You know, we gave up everything we had and we've come and followed you. You know, what are we going to receive? And so Jesus returned to what's been a theme, going all the way back to the Sermon on the Mount that we read in chapters 5, 6, 7. Remember where he talked about building up treasures in heaven as opposed to on earth. Right? He said, for whatever you've given up in this life, for the sake of Christ, you'll receive in the kingdom of heaven, he says, 100-fold. And then he ended that statement with the statement, but many who are first will be last, and the last first. You may see chapter 20 begins with the word for. Right? That's one of those conjunctions. Right? So he's about to tell a story here when we start chapter 20 to illustrate the point that he's been making. Right? So that's where we left off last time with his statement, many of those who are last shall be first, and many who are first shall be last. So now he's going to start to tell this story. Before we start, anybody have any questions left over from last time? Or just in general? Okay. So chapter 20, verse 1. For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire laborers for his vineyard. And when he had agreed with the laborers for a denarius a day, he sent them into his vineyard. So, just so you know, a denarius was a Roman coin, and that was typical for a day's wages. In fact, that was sort of how their economy was organized to prevent inflation, is that a denarius was a day's wages for manual labor. And so food prices, the prices of things would fluctuate relative to a denarius. But a denarius was a stable amount. Well, I don't know, what's minimum wage for 8 hours? What's minimum wage now? $8.25? $7.25? So it'd be the equivalent of about $60 today. Yeah. So 1 day's wage for somebody doing manual labor. This is field work, right? This isn't, skilled labor. This is just go out there and work. Okay. So he goes out in the morning This is we don't have this in West Virginia, but where I grew up in California, there were always a cluster of people hanging around the Home Depot in the morning, and guys would drive by and be like, "I need 5 guys who can do painting," right? 3 guys who can hang sheetrocks, right? They'd jump in the back of his truck, right, and drive off. And then about 8:30, 9 a.m., the police would come by and run off whoever was left, because they weren't necessarily supposed to be in this country. But so this is a situation like that. This landowner goes out in the morning. He goes to people who are day laborers, right? They don't work for someone per se, right? And this is what, for example, Jesus' father Joseph did. We talked about this back at the beginning of Matthew. It doesn't actually say he's a carpenter anywhere. What it says he is a teknon, which means essentially a day laborer. So he would have been someone in the village of Nazareth who went and worked on whatever needed to be worked on, right, that day. Somebody needed their wall built back up, their roof fixed, right? It would have been different things from day to day. But so that's what this job is, and there's a great number of people in these villages at this time in Judea, these peasants who this is basically it. They didn't have careers open to them in the Roman world. So he goes, finds some laborers to work his field, gets laborers he needs, he agrees with them, standard wage, right? 1 denarius for a day's work. Verse 3, and he went out about the 3rd hour and saw others standing idle in the marketplace, and said to them, you also go into the vineyard, and whatever is right I will give to you. So they went. So the 3rd hour is about 9 in the morning. So he goes back at 9 in the morning, he sees some more guys standing around looking for work. He says, well, head out there, work my vineyard too, and at the end of the day we'll settle up. So they head out to work. Verse 5, again he went out at about the 6th and the 9th hour, so at about noon, and then about 3 in the afternoon, and did likewise. And about the 11th hour he went out and found others standing idle, and said to them, why have you been standing here idle all day? Because the 11th hour, we're talking, that's about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. He says, why have you guys been sitting around all day instead of working? They said to him, because no one hired us. So he said to them, you also go into the vineyard, and whatever is right you will receive. So when evening had come, right, the sun sets, time to stop working, the owner of the vineyard said to his steward, call the laborers and give them their wages, beginning with the last to the first. And when those came who were hired about the 11th hour, they each received a denarius. But when the first came, they supposed that they would receive more, and they likewise received each a denarius. Right, so the people, sunset's about what, 7? Right, so these guys who only went out there and worked for 2 hours, he gives them a denarius, right? So back in the back of the line, the guys who've been there all day working hard, right? They're figuring, oh, well, he gave them denarius for 2 hours, he's probably going to give us more. All right. Good deal. They get to the front, they get a denarius too. Right? So they're a little upset. Right? They're about ready to unionize. Right? This isn't fair. Verse 11, and when they had received it, they complained against the landowner, saying, these last men have worked only 1 hour, and you made them equal to us, who have borne the burden in the heat of the day. But he answered one of them and said, friend, I am doing you no wrong. Did you not agree with me for a denarius? And he said, when I came out and hired you, I offered you a denarius. You agreed to it. You agreed to it. So why are you upset now that I gave you what I agreed to give you? Verse 14, take what is yours and go your way. I wish to give to this last man the same as to you. Is it not lawful for me to do what I wish with my own things? Or is your eye evil because I am good? So the last will be first and the first last. For many are called, but few chosen. So what's he getting at here? Right? What's he getting at here? Well, remember how we've talked about how the Pharisees looked at things. Right? The Pharisees are the teachers of the law. Right? They're the ones who are the religious teachers teaching them how to understand things. Right? So the way the Pharisees look at things, right? There's a way you live life in this world, right? That's the Torah. You follow the Torah, you follow all the rules. And if you follow all the rules, right, and do everything you're supposed to do, right, then what happens? Well, two things happen. Number one, you get blessed in this world, right, because you lived your life the right way, and you did the right things, right? And then when the time comes, the Pharisees believed in the resurrection of the dead, right? When the time comes, after God's judgment, right, you get to live forever with Him because you followed the rules and you lived your life the right way. Now we've seen as we've been, even back in the Old Testament, right? As soon as we get to Job, there's a big monkey wrench that gets thrown into this, right? Because Job isn't blessed, so what happens? His friends come out to him and say, okay, what did you do? Right? You sinned, clearly it was something big, right? Because things are going really bad for you. Just confess what you did, don't be embarrassed, just admit whatever it was. And Job's sitting there saying, I didn't do anything. Right? I didn't do anything. My conscience is clean before God. They're like, okay, yeah, but your kids are all dead, your wife left you, you're sitting in a dung heap, and you're covered with sores. What'd you do? Right? Because it doesn't make sense, right, from their understanding. So there are already a lot of monkey wrenches in this. But the Pharisees, the people with this view, right, are the people who, in this parable Jesus just told, they're the people who showed up for work at the beginning of the day. Right? Right? They made an agreement. Right? There was the covenant, the old covenant. Right? Agreement between God and them. Right? You live this way. Right? You'll see what's promised you. Okay? Now, in addition to them, there are all the people who the Pharisees considered to be sinners. Right? The tax collectors, everyone who wasn't following the law, basically everyone who wasn't a Pharisee at some point or other, right? And so those people, according to the Pharisees, were cursed and should be cursed in this life, right? And they were going to go Sheol, they were going to go into the grave, they were going to essentially, for all intents and purposes, go to hell, right? When they were done. And we've talked about how Christ, by going and spending time with these people, who are the enemy according to the Pharisees, right? Because the Pharisees believe what would cause this to happen, right? Because they're sitting there, occupied by the Romans, being punished by the Romans. Clearly, it's not for their sins because they're the Pharisees and they haven't done anything wrong. Right? They're the good guys keeping the law. So there must be some reason why God hasn't come back yet and judged the earth and raised the dead. I know what it is. It's all these people who aren't keeping the law like we are. They're the problem. They're the enemy. We need to get rid of them. Stone them to death. Run them out of town. Get them crucified by the Romans. Whatever we have to do so that we can purify ourselves and then God will come back. So Jesus going to them has already upset them. But what Jesus is saying here in this story is not only has God not rejected or cursed or condemned these people, the sinners, the tax collectors, the Pharisees, but He's offered them the exact same thing that He offered the Pharisees. If they turn and repent, they're going to receive the exact same reward as the Pharisees. Exact same reward as the Pharisees. Even if they do it at the 11th hour. Even if they do it, as we're going to see later, while they're hanging on a cross next to Jesus. Minutes before they die. Right? They are offered the same reward. So these people who have been last, these people who have been at the bottom, they're at the bottom of Roman society, right? They're peasants, they're non-persons in Roman law, right? They're living in abject poverty, and who have even in their own culture, even in the Jewish culture, they've been at the bottom, right? Because they're sinners, they're tax collectors, right? They're not the good people, right? Who are keeping the Torah. They've been at the bottom of the bottom, right? These people are going to end up here. And a good many of these people right now who think they're on the fast track, right? They're on the fast track to heaven, they're on the fast track to God's blessing, may just end up down here. May just end up down here. And that's the picture he's given. He says, many are called, but few are chosen. What does that mean? That means the word chosen there is a bad translation. Excuse me. One of the things that the Orthodox Study Bible did that's good in some places and not so good in others is they kept most of the New King James Version, which is essentially a slight reworking of the King James Version. But I think there is a lot of the King James translators in 1611 were Puritans, they're Calvinists. So, chosen may give an impression. Many are called, if you are chosen, sounds like, right, God sort of invites everybody, but then in the end, he sort of picks and chooses who he actually wants. Right? Sort of sounds like that. That's not really, chosen is not really a good translation. The word that's used there in Greek is closer, even though this sounds even more Calvinist, to elect. To elect. And it's used primarily not to talk about individual people, but it's used to talk about the nation of Israel. The status that the nation of Israel had in the Old Testament. Right? And that's sometimes translated as chosen too. Right? We'll talk about Israel being the chosen people, right, in the Old Testament. Right? And as we've seen, reading through the Old Testament, chosen isn't necessarily, chosen again makes it sound like God loved Israel and he didn't like the other nations. Right? Or he loved them more than he loved the other nations. Right? Whereas what we've seen is that in actuality, what this meant was God had chosen Israel for a special purpose different than the other nations. It's not that he didn't care about the Edomites or the Moabites or the Assyrians, right? He sends Jonah the prophet to Nineveh, the capital of the Assyrian Empire, to try to call them to repentance. Right? He cares about the whole world that he created. Right? But he called Israel for a particular purpose. And remember, we've said that purpose was for them to live their lives together as a people differently from all the other nations on the earth. So that the other nations would look at them and say, we want what they have. Right? We want what they have, and so they would then come and start worshiping Israel's God. Right? So they were chosen for this particular purpose that was different. The other nations were not chosen for that purpose. So, there it goes. So we're going to see, we've already seen a little bit, because Christ already sent out his apostles a couple of times, but right, he calls his disciples, right, and then he calls them to be apostles. He sends them out, right? So the apostles are what? He chose them, right? And I mean, in a sense, right? Does that mean he loved those 12 more than he loved like the rest of the 70? No, right? He loved them more than he loves you and me? No, right? But he called those 12 people and those 70 people in the difference, right? For a particular purpose. Right? We're going to see at the end of Matthew to go out and evangelize, to go out and spread the gospel to the whole world. It was going to be through them, right? But he wanted the gospel to go out to the whole world. He was concerned about everybody. So when it says here, many are called, but few are elect. Right? It's not saying, right, we go and preach the gospel to everybody. There's only this certain group that God actually wants to save. What it's saying is the invitation goes out to everyone. Right? But there are particular people who are called for particular purposes. That's not the end of the passage. Okay? Just like he said, many who are last will be first, and many who are first will be last. And then he told a story. We're going to see here in a second, he's going to tell another story to illustrate this one. Okay? To illustrate this one. The idea, everybody, the invitation goes out to everybody. Right, to return to God. But individual people are called to particular tasks, to particular purposes. Not everyone is called to do the same thing. That's why we've got thousands of saints in the Orthodox Church, and none of their lives are exactly identical. Because God called them to do different things, to become holy in different ways, at different times and different places. So verse 17, now Jesus going up to Jerusalem. This is a geographic update. Remember, we were heading south from Galilee. We read at the beginning last time that he had come into the area of Judea, right? In what they called at that point the Transjordan, which was on the other side. Now he's coming close to the city of Jerusalem itself. Jesus, going up to Jerusalem, took the 12 disciples aside on the road and said to them, behold, we are going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be betrayed to the chief priests and to the scribes, and they will condemn him to death, and deliver him to the Gentiles to mock and to scourge and to crucify. And the third day he will rise again. Now this is what, the third or fourth time he's told them this? In various level of detail. At least this time none of them protest. Remember in the past, they were, oh no. Right? At least this time they don't say anything, but as we're going to find out, we're going to see they still didn't quite get it. All right? They still sort of interpret this as Jesus sort of being gloomy. Right? Like he's saying, well, we're going to go to Jerusalem, and here's probably what's going to happen. They don't understand. Right? They don't understand that Jesus is telling them this is what's going to happen because this is the plan. Right? This is the plan. As we talked about before, the reason they can't understand that is what he's describing is the stereotypical way false messianic movements ended at this time in history. Okay? And even after this. Right? This is what happens when you're not really the Messiah. In the first century in Judea, you get up, you proclaim yourself to be the Messiah, you gather up a group of people, you go, you march on Jerusalem or one of the other big cities. In Israel, the Romans catch you, they crucify you and your followers, and that's it. That's it, end of movement. Right? Everybody goes, who's left, who survives, goes home. Right? It says, oops, guess he wasn't it. Right? So, with that as the mindset, right? This is what happens if they don't decide. Jesus pulling him aside on the road and saying, okay, look, here's what's going to happen. Here's the game plan. We're going to go into the city, right? They're going to reject everything I say. They're going to put me on trial. They're going to abuse me. They're going to hand me over to the Romans. I'm going to be crucified. They're going, well, we hope not. Right? We hope not. Remember on the road to Emmaus, the two disciples in Luke's gospel, right? Jesus comes and walks with them, and what do they say? You know, Jesus was crucified. They left town, right? Well, I guess it's over, right? And they say to Jesus, they say, well, we had hoped he was going to be the one who redeemed Israel. But obviously not, because the Romans crucified him, right? That's what happens when you're a phony. So this is why they're still confused. It's easy for us to say, well, boneheads, like he's told you, 6 times that this was going to happen. And then it happens and you're all shocked, right? Well, that's because what he was telling them, they couldn't wrap their head around. Right? What he was telling them, they couldn't wrap their head around it. Then the mother of Zebedee's sons came to him with her sons. So this is James and John, who are part of, where we talked about, are sort of part of Jesus' inner circle. Peter, James, and John, like when he went on the Mount of Transfiguration, right? They came with him. Well, their mother comes with her sons, kneeling down and asking something from him. He said to her, "What do you wish?" She said to him, "Grant that these 2 sons of mine may sit, one on your right hand and the other on the left in your kingdom." Right? So she at least, right, isn't buying what Jesus just said. Right? I'm going to put this in context. Jesus just tells them this, right? Tells them, I'm going there to die. I'm going there to be humiliated and crucified. Right? And she comes up and says, well, after you march in there and overthrow the Romans, and you're sitting on your throne, I want my 2 boys, right, to sit on your right hand and your left hand. Right? Sit on your right hand and your left hand. Verse 22, but Jesus answered and said, you do not know what you ask. Are you able to drink the cup that I am about to drink and be baptized with the baptism that I am baptized with? Right? What's Jesus saying? Jesus is saying, about a week from now, it's going to look like this. You really want to be on my right hand and my left hand side? Right? That's what Jesus is saying to her. You don't know what you're asking, Mama, or you wouldn't be so keen on it, right?
Is this the gospel reading this morning? Yeah.
Yes. Right? About a week from now, this is where we're going to be. Do you really want your sons on either side?
Was these guys following him already?
I'm sorry?
Was this two of the apostles following him? Was Zebedee's mother? Zebedee's sons?
I'm sorry.
Was it 2 of the disciples that was following him?
Right, we're with him already. He's called the 12 aside.
Yeah.
Right. And then Mama comes up. Yep. Okay. So, he says to them, are you able to drink this cup that I'm about to drink? Where does that image come from? Remember, that image comes from the book of Isaiah in particular. And where was that image used? It was used in the book of Isaiah, when Isaiah talking about what was about to happen to Israel, the northern kingdom. Meaning, it was about to get wiped out. Right? He said, the cup of the Lord's wrath has been mingled. And he's going to make you drink it. He's going to make you drink it. That's what he's alluding to. Jesus says, you really think you're ready to drink this? You think you're ready for the baptism? Showing that they don't get it, at the end of verse 22, they said to him, we're able. Right? Because what are they thinking? They're thinking, oh, you got some other baptism. Okay, you got some other secret initiation, some kind of handshake, where we get to the next level, right? Next level initiation, right? Like one of them mystery cults. Okay, this is cool, right? Don't understand what he's talking about. Verse 23, so he said to them, you will indeed drink my cup and be baptized with the baptism that I am baptized with. But to sit on my right hand and on my left is not mine to give, but it is for those for whom it is prepared by my Father. So he tells them, well, guess what? Right? Guess what? You and all the disciples for that matter, right? John is the only one who wasn't ultimately martyred. And John spent most of his life imprisoned in a salt mine. So he said, you are going to suffer. Right? You are going to suffer the way I'm going to suffer. You are going to be rejected the way I'm rejected. You are going to ultimately die the way I'm going to die. You've been chosen for it. Right? You've been chosen for it. That's a double-edged, right? God's called you to a particular purpose, and guess what? This is it. Right? You thought it just meant you got the gold ribbon on your chest and the good seating, right? Means a lot more than you think. He says, but those positions on my right hand and my left hand in the kingdom is not mine to give, but it is for those for whom it is prepared by my Father. Traditionally. And you can see this on any Orthodox church's iconostase. The people who are seated on Christ's right hand and left hand. I'm doing my lousy drawings here again. Iconostase. All right, we've got the icon of Christ right here, right? Okay. So on his right hand is his right. His right hand is the Theotokos. All right, why? Well, because as Archangel Gabriel said to her, blessed are you among women. Right? Who's over here? John the Baptist, John the Forerunner. Why? Because Christ said about him, there is no son born of women, none is greater than John. Right? None is greater than John. So traditionally, these are the people who are on the right and left hand. Just as a note, that is not the tradition of the Roman Catholic Church. Tradition of the Roman Catholic Church has the Theotokos on the right, but has St. Peter on the left. And there's, you probably are imagining already, there's some theology there. Some of the difference in our theology is reflected right there. Right, in terms of their view of the papacy and the hierarchy versus our view of monasticism and spiritual leadership. Some of that's contained right there. But so that's our tradition. So verse 24, just in case you thought maybe the other 10 disciples got it. When the 10 heard it, they were greatly displeased with the two brothers. So again, they not only do the two brothers still not get it, the other 10 don't get it because they're jealous. Right? They're jealous. We want to die a horrible martyr's death too, darn it. Right. See, they don't get it. Right? They think again, this means, oh, you're special. Right? He loves you more. Right?
Steve, why would the mother of these two ask for that? Where were these guys from? My mom.
Well, this is interesting because it's a little different some of the other Gospels. In some of the other Gospels, the disciples are arguing amongst themselves about who's going to be the right. A whole other. But But in this case, yeah. It's kind of, John was the youngest disciple in his defense. He was a teenager.
What, teenage?
Yeah, he was a teenager. And you know how moms are. You know, I want my boys to be, you know. But yeah. But the overarching thing is that the reason it's right after he tells them this goes like that. Right? They still don't get it. They're still thinking, we're about to march into Jerusalem and take the place over. Right? And Jesus is going to be the new king, and we're all going to have the important offices and be rich. And, you know, right? Live the good life. That's what this is all about. That's what's about to happen. Right? And so, you know, and if you look, chapter 21, it's Palm Sunday. Okay. So again, we're a week out. They start the week, this is how they're thinking. You can kind of understand how this is a really rough week for the disciples. Right? Because everything they think is going to happen goes exactly the opposite way. Right? And as much as Jesus keeps trying to tell them, this is the plan, this is what has to happen, here's why it's happening, it goes right over their head. It goes right over their head because they have so firmly entrenched in their minds this view of how God has to do what he's going to do. Right? There's a lesson there to us too. Right? When we decide what we want God to do. Right? Here's what I need to fix my life and make my life perfect. God, I need you to do this. Right? So we pray and pray and pray for whatever that is. Right? To happen. Right? And especially in those kind of instances, I think God likes to do the exact opposite. Right? To sort of teach us, you know what? You don't need... first of all, you don't know what you need. Right? You think you do. But you don't. And that it's not getting what we think we need or want that's going to make us happy, and that's going to make our life complete and give us peace. It's being content and living with him, right? And learning that, you know, even when everything goes sideways as badly as it could possibly go, which is about what's about to happen to the disciples. I mean, they're going to go from top of the world here. Hey, which one of us is going to get to be the Grand Vizier? You know, Grand Mufti, right? They're go from that to running and hiding and cowering. You know, for fear that they're next to get crucified in a few days. Right? Even when everything goes completely set, that doesn't mean God has abandoned you or them. Right? It just means God's working in a way that you don't understand and you can't see yet. That's why, just as a little liturgical note, if you've ever wondered why in the pre-sanctified liturgy, when we come out for the great entrance, we've got the cloth over our head. It looks kind of spooky. Like this hood, right? That's because who Christ was and what he was doing was hidden leading up to. It was only when you get to the resurrection that it was revealed that they understood what was really happening. That's a sort of liturgical image of that. That's why we do that. So yes, they're not only not able to trust God when they can't see what he's doing or understand what he's working. They have a pretty firm idea in their head how God is supposed to do what they want him to do at this point. So the other 10 here, they're mad now. Verse 25, but Jesus called them to himself and said, so he calls them all over again. Okay, huddle up again, guys. Everybody back over here. You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and those who are great exercise authority over them. Yet it shall not be so among you. But whoever desires to become great among you, let him be your servant. The word there is actually slave. And whoever desires to be first among you, let him be your slave. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. So he calls them over and says, again, the way you're used to thinking this works, where you've got Caesar up here, right, and the senators, and then, other Roman officials, and then wealthy Roman patricians, and then plain old Roman citizens, and then non-citizens, down here, peasants. And slaves, right, who are down here, all the way at the bottom, right? And your goal in life, if you're a Roman at least, if you're not a Roman citizen, your goal in life is to get Roman citizenship. If you've got Roman citizenship and you're down here, your goal in life is to work your way up here, right, as close as you can get, right? And that's when you have power and authority, right? Because you're in charge. You're in charge of people's, at this point, lives, right? Essentially. That's the main power Rome had, was violence, right? And they used it by killing people. That was their solution to most problems. Kill a bunch of people. That went from the legions, the word decimate in English. You may notice it seems like the word decimal. Right? That means 10. That's because if a Roman military unit showed cowardice, they would decimate it. What they would do is they would go and they'd cast lots, basically roll dice, randomly pick 10% of the unit. The rest of the unit would beat them to death. That was how they kept discipline in the Roman military. Okay? This is how power and authority worked in the Roman world. Right? When Pilate was worried a few years before this, he was worried that there might be an uprising by the Jews in Jerusalem. He went out and grabbed 150 random Jewish people off the street, right at Passover time, crucified them along the roads leading into Jerusalem. So everybody coming to celebrate the Passover had to walk by these lines of dead and dying people, right, hung on these crosses. Right? This is how power and authority worked in Rome. Jesus is saying the way it works in my kingdom is the exact opposite. It's the exact opposite. If you want to be important in the kingdom of God, right? If you want to be important in the kingdom of God, then you need to make yourself a slave. Right? If you're up here and you're wealthy, like the young man he talked to, you need to give away everything you've got and put yourself down there at the bottom. You've got to be willing to give it all up. If you want to be on my right hand and my left hand, then you need to climb up on this cross, and then you could be on my right hand and my left hand. That's what makes you important. That's what makes you special in the kingdom of heaven. It's how much you're willing to be a slave. And the proof of that is that Jesus, who's God, which puts him up above Caesar, even though Caesar claimed to be a god. He's up above Caesar. What did he do? He came and he put himself down here. Right, down here. So he's taking their whole understanding of power and authority and turning it on its head. And so this hasn't changed all that much today. Right? We're a little less bloody, right? At least here in the United States. There are governments or in other parts of the world that are just as bad as the Romans or worse, right, in terms of violence. Here in the United States, we're not quite that. We don't have public executions anymore. We did until fairly recently. We don't anymore, right? But how does power and authority work still in the United States? Power and authority means I can control you. I can tell you what to do. And if you don't do it, I can punish you somehow. Right? Still how power and authority work in our world. And just like money, which is often connected to it in our world, we get distracted pursuing it. Right? Because we want to be important. Right? We want to be important. We want to be special. We want to be important. We want to be special. Well, how do we do that? Well, we've got to work our way up and become an important person according to the world standards. Right? Which means we have power over other people, or we have money, we have influence, we have this or that. Right? And what Jesus is saying is, if you really want to be important in the kingdom of heaven, the one that's going to last forever, right? For eternity, not the one that's going to end, but for eternity, then you need to come down here. You need to come down here. Because in the kingdom of heaven, none of the Caesars is very important. None of the pharaohs of Egypt are very important. Who here can name one of the kings of Lithuania? But they were pretty important, right? When they were alive. Right? They had a lot of wealth. Big army, controlled most of Eastern Europe for hundreds of years. And now we can't name a single one. Why? Because everything in this world. Okay? Yet today in Orthodox churches all over the world, we talked about and remembered a woman named Mary, who was a peasant, essentially a prostitute. She actually says she was worse than a prostitute because most of the time she didn't even take money. So we'll just say whore, okay? who was so wicked when she tried to visit what became the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. She was restrained and couldn't go in, and so she wandered off into the desert and spent the rest of her life fasting and praying. From the perspective of the world, I can't think of somebody less important. If I'm an atheist, what did she accomplish with her life? Right? But how important is she in the kingdom of heaven? Or St. John the Forerunner? Or any of the disciples? Illiterate fishermen? Right? And or tax collectors? And or... They've all become great and they've become important because they put themselves down here. So when you or I are looking to be important, for our life to be important, for our life to have meaning, for our life to have eternal value, if we're worried that, what's the point of all this? I'm going to die and 200 years from now nobody will ever even remember I was alive, right? We want our lives to be important. Christ is telling us how to make your life important. And that's service to other people in the kingdom. The one who's the most important is the one who serves the most. The one who gives the most and takes the least. That's the person who's the greatest and whose life is most important. And the one who's remembered, even if not by anybody else on this earth, who's remembered by God. Which is a lot more important. So verse 29. Now they went out of Jericho, a great multitude followed him. And there's Matthew's kind of setting us up, right? They went out of Jericho, they're heading into Jerusalem. A great multitude is following him, right? What are we supposed to be thinking? Here's his army, right? Here's his army. He's got his lieutenants, he's got his army. They're marching on Jerusalem. Here we go, right? We talked about how the word gospel in Roman usage referred to the report of a military victory, right? Finally, we're getting to it. Okay. Too much talking, Matthew. The first two acts. We're getting to the third act. Here's the fight. We're heading for the big showdown, right? Setting us. This is how the disciples were thinking, of whom Matthew was one, right? Matthew's putting this into his own. This is what they were thinking. Right, here we go. Now's the time. We're marching into Jerusalem. Verse 30, and behold, two blind men sitting by the road, when they heard that Jesus was passing by, cried out, saying, have mercy on us, O Lord, Son of David. Right? Have mercy on us, O Lord, Son of David. Not a coincidence. Right? Exactly what they say here. Son of David means what? The Messiah. The king. Right? David was the king. Right? Where it says the Lord, Son of David, they're starting to cheer him on already. Right? Here's our new king. Time to get rid of the old one. Right? The Caesar guy. Verse 31, then the multitude warned them that they should be quiet. Why would they do that? Exactly. Right? You don't need the Romans cheering this. Right? Coming out after us. Right? So they try to shush them. And they cry out all the more, saying, have mercy on us, O Lord, Son of David. So Jesus stood still and called them and said, what do you want me to do for you? They said to him, Lord, that our eyes may be opened. So Jesus had compassion and touched their eyes, and immediately their eyes received sight, and they followed him. Why is this dropped? Right in here. Well, you see Jesus heals all kinds of people. Right? He's been healing people all the time. Why is this one dropped right here? Well, two reasons. Number one, we see the spirit the people are in. The Lord, Son of David. Right? But why particularly the healing of blind people? It's Matthew again pointing us to the fact that they weren't getting it. They couldn't see. Right? They weren't literally blind like these men, but they couldn't see what Jesus was doing. Right? They didn't understand what Jesus was doing. Right? They were still laboring under a big misunderstanding of what Jesus was doing. Chapter 21. Now when they drew near Jerusalem and came to Bethphage, at the Mount of Olives, then Jesus sent two disciples, saying to them, go into the village opposite you, and immediately you will find a donkey tied and a colt with her. Loose them and bring them to me. And if anyone says anything to you, you shall say, the Lord has need of them, and immediately he will send them. Okay. So he says, they're getting near to town, Mount of Olives right outside Jerusalem. He says, go to the village, you'll find this donkey and this colt tied up there. Notice it's a donkey and a colt. Two animals. Two animals. And he says, tells them to get them and bring them to him. Okay. And if anybody says anything, right? Because technically what they're doing would be called what? Stealing. Yeah. If anybody says anything to you, say the Lord has need of them, right? Meaning the Lord, God, right? Right? God needs them. Okay. Verse 4, all this was done that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by the prophet, saying, tell the daughter of Zion, Behold, your king is coming to you, lowly and sitting on a donkey, a colt, the foal of a donkey. So a couple things here. First of all, this is important to know. Matthew is telling us that Jesus rode into town on two animals. As odd as that sounds. Right? As odd as that sounds. We'll see it's different in different Gospels. Why? Well, because he's trying to connect what Jesus is doing to this particular prophecy. Okay? To connect it to this particular prophecy. Even though, if you sit there and try and visualize it, right? He's sitting on a donkey and a colt at the same time. Right? It doesn't really visually work. He's trying very hard to connect it to this text in Zechariah 9. So, let's go back briefly. If you've got an Orthodox Study Bible, Zechariah 9:9 is on page 1047. 47. Because we've been talking about, I'm doing this for a reason. We did this earlier in Matthew, remember when we were at the beginning? Because people like to criticize St. Matthew and say he quotes things horribly out of context. Right? Remember, out of Egypt I have called my son, for example, when he's talking about Mary and Joseph having taken Jesus to Egypt to avoid Herod. Right? And you're like, well, that's not talking about Jesus and Isaiah. It's talking about Israel. Right? It's talking about Israel. Right? But we went back and we looked at the passage, and if you look at the whole passage, what God is talking about is the fact that, remember, Joseph brought his brothers into Egypt, why? Save them from a famine. Right? So God protected Israel in Egypt. Right? But then when they were going to be enslaved, when they were enslaved, he brought them out. Right? And how that was being connected to what was happening with Jesus, Herod being set up as Pharaoh. Right? We talked about those connections. So it wasn't just, Matthew going, okay, they went to Egypt. Is there something in the Old Testament about Egypt I can use? Right? Picking this thing because it said Egypt. Right? They was talking about the whole context. So we're going to do the same thing here, now that people have had time to flip. Because especially, now that I've mentioned that Matthew has him riding on two animals at the same time, right? You're like, okay, is he just stretching? Right? Is he just like really stretching, like, find me something in the Old Testament about a king riding into a town, right? And it mentions two different animals. Well, okay, we'll just have Jesus riding two different animals. Right? Is that what he's doing? And you laugh. But there are people with PhDs who make that argument that that's what Matthew's doing. Okay? We laugh, but that's the level at which a lot of people read these texts. Okay? Partly because they're not looking to understand them, they're looking to debunk them, Okay, so Zechariah 9 verse 9. Okay. The preceding part, right? God has gone through the earlier part of chapter 9 and talked about, let's go all the way back to chapter 8. Chapter 8, right? God has said that ultimately, after the exile, he's going to restore his people, Israel. Right? In the beginning part of chapter 9, right? He's talked about how all of Israel's enemies, right, who were gloating and prospering at the time while Israel was going into exile, like the Philistines, etc., how they were going to receive their judgment, right? They were going to receive the consequences of their actions. Okay. So now in Zechariah 9:9, rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion, proclaim it aloud, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, your king comes to you, he is righteous and saving. He is gentle and mounted upon a donkey, even a young foal. He will utterly destroy the chariots out of Ephraim and the horse out of Jerusalem. The bow of war shall be utterly destroyed, and there shall be abundance and peace among the nations. You shall rule over the waters as far as the sea, and over the rivers to the ends of the earth. And by the blood of your covenant you freed your prisoners from the pit having no water. You prisoners from the congregation, you shall live in the fortress, and for one day of your exile I will repay to you double. And it goes on to talk about the Greeks and the other people who have oppressed Israel at that point. Okay. So is this just Jesus rode into town, I need to find something about a king riding into town? Let's look at what Zechariah says here. Because from the foregoing, right, chapter 8, right, we're going to restore Israel, right? That's what they wanted, right? We want the kingdom of Israel back. Right? And beginning of chapter 9, right, God's going to smite him some Philistines, he's going to smite him some Edomites, he's going to smite it, right? A lot of people are going to get smit, right, when he does it, right? So this is all playing into the idea that the disciples already had. Right? Messiah is going to come, whoop up on the Romans, right? Establish his kingdom in Israel, make all the Gentiles our slaves, to stick it to them for having made us slaves, right? That's how they're thinking. That's what they're saying. Now, if they've read Zechariah, though, they come to 9 verse 9. Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. What is that? That's Jerusalem, right? Proclaim it aloud, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, your king comes to you. All good. He's righteous and saving. All good. He's gentle. Gentle? What happened to the butt kicking we wanted? Gentle. Right? Mounted upon a donkey and a young foal. You mean a war horse, right? Right? A big war horse? Maybe he's got a chariot? Big sword? No, he's gentle and he's riding a donkey. What's a donkey? It's a pack animal. It's a service animal, right? It's a work animal. He will utterly destroy the chariots out of Ephraim and the horse out of Jerusalem. So the king shows up, he's going to get rid of all the weapons? Why would he get rid of all the weapons? Right, he's gentle. The bow of war shall be utterly destroyed. Wait, bow of war is going to be destroyed. And there shall be abundance and peace among the nations. The word nations there is Gentiles. Among the Gentiles. Wait, what do you mean there's going to be peace among the Gentiles? There's not supposed to be many of them left, right? He's supposed to take them out. He's going to come and bring peace between Israel and the Gentiles? He shall rule over the waters as far as the sea and over the rivers to the ends of the earth. He's not going to rule over Israel and enslave everybody else? He's going to rule, the whole world? And how is he going to free the prisoners, right? These prisoners from the congregations, people in exile. How is he going to free them? By the blood of his covenant, right? The new covenant. Okay. So what Matthew is doing here with Zechariah 9:9 is not just proof texting, right? Or trying to make some bizarre argument that, look, Jesus rode 2 animals, so that means he must be the Messiah or something, right? He's pointing back to, he's just set us up. Here's the confusion and misunderstanding we have. Right? Here's why we should have known better. If we'd really understood the scriptures, right? We were just talking about the disciples on the road to Emmaus and how they didn't get it. Right? How did Jesus explain it to them? He went through the scriptures. Go back to the Old Testament. Walked them through it. And then all of a sudden they went, ding. Oh. Right? This is St. Matthew after the resurrection going, ding. Oh. Oh. Zechariah 9:9 and following. The king we were promised was going to be gentle. He was going to put an end to war. Right? He wasn't going to do to Caesar what Caesar did to us, which is what they wanted. Right? He wasn't going to exercise power the way people in this world exercise power. Right? He was going to come and bring peace, not violence. Peace between Israel and the nations. Right now, by gathering them all together into one flock in a new covenant. Right? With the whole world. And that's why when we get to Holy Thursday, right, and he's instituting the Eucharist, and he gets to the cup, he says, this is my blood of the new covenant. Right? It's his blood. He's coming to shed his blood, inaugurate a new covenant for the whole world that'll mean peace not just between God and human beings, right? Like the covenant with Noah, remember he set his bow in the clouds, he set it down, he said there's now peace between God and human beings. Zechariah says he's going to break the bow of warfare. There's now peace between God and human beings, and peace between human beings and human beings. Right? Look at this new covenant. Between Jews and Gentiles, Jews and Greeks, men and women, slaves and freemen. Right? So he's saying we should have known all along. We should have seen when he went riding into town. We should have remembered Zechariah. We should have remembered the kind of king that God had promised us and seen what Jesus was doing and seen that Jesus was it by how gentle he was. Right? By the fact that he didn't come to start a war. He came to end them. He came to, as he said in chapter 20, lay down his life as a ransom for many. So back to Matthew. Hopefully everybody kept a finger there or something. Matthew 21, verse 6. So the disciples went and did as Jesus commanded them. They brought the donkey and the colt, laid their clothes on them, and set him on them. Right? So he's riding the two. Right? But the point is to connect us back to that passage. Not just that Jesus is the Messiah, but Jesus is the Messiah that they were actually promised. And a very great multitude spread their clothes on the road. Others cut down branches from the trees and spread them on the road. Then the multitudes who went before and those who followed cried out, saying, Hosanna to the Son of David. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna in the highest. And when he had come into Jerusalem, all the city was moved, saying, Who is this? So the multitude said, This is Jesus, the prophet from Nazareth of Galilee. So, we've got two pieces. We've got Matthew now, after the fact, saying, we should have seen then what was going on. We should have understood, but we didn't. Right? And we've got the people of Jerusalem who still don't understand. Who are revving this up too. And the fact that now all the people, right, this is Jesus the prophet from God, all the people are talking about it. This should be ominous to us. Right? Because again, I mentioned what happened just a few years before this. Pontius Pilate got wind. There might be some kind of insurrection. Bad things ensue. Right? So the fact that all this city is talking about it, this should be ominous to us. This isn't going to go well. There's going to be a confrontation here. Verse 12, Then Jesus went into the temple of God and drove out all those who bought and sold in the temple, and overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who sold doves. And he said to them, It is written, My house shall be called a house of prayer, but you have made it a den of thieves. So, This, from the perspective of our still confused disciples, right? And people of Jerusalem, this is a good start. Right? He's kicking over tables. Right? He's coming in here to clean house. They're all for this kind of thing. Right? And we talked before about who the money changers were. Remember the money changers, there was a whole separate set of temple currency that you had to use at the Jerusalem temple because the Roman coins had images of Caesar and of the Roman gods on them. Right? Which graven images, it's idolatry. Jews wouldn't have them in the temple. So you'd have to come, if you're coming from a long way off, and you're coming to sacrifice at the temple, right? And you've got a 2, 3, 4 week journey. Kind of hard to bring a goat. Really hard to bring a cow. If you got a big family, try to bring a couple of goats, right? A couple of cows, right? All these animals, you're not going to do it, right? So what are you going to do? You're going to say, well, we'll buy a couple of goats when we get there, right? When we get there, we'll buy a couple of goats. We'll bring money, buy a couple of goats there. Well, so you get to the temple. Step one, okay, now I got to change out my money. I've got my Roman money. Got to change that out for temple money. Okay. Sort of like your Chuck E. Cheese tokens, right? You can't just put a quarter in the game, right? You got to have your Chuck E. Cheese tokens. And once you have Chuck E. Cheese tokens, you can never get the real money back. Sort of the same way here. That was part of the racket with the temple money, right? And there's an exchange rate. Okay. So you change in your Roman currency for this temple money. You can't spend this temple money anywhere else. Right? You get charged a fee, right? Your exchange fee, and you get charged it in the other hand if you try and change it back. Okay? But so let's say now you change your money, right? Now you're going to go buy, talks about the people selling doves, right? The people selling animals. Now you got to go to them. Well, they're all there to make a profit. Right? They're not there selling at cost, out of the kindness of their heart, right? All day. They've got a family to support, right? So they're all marking up their animals because you can't buy the animals anywhere else, right? You can't go buy Roman animals; they're unclean, right? So what are you going to do? They got a corner on the market. This is why Jesus gets upset. This is why Jesus gets upset. Because the whole purpose of the sacrificial system was not to supply for a cottage industry, right, in the city of Jerusalem. The point of the sacrificial system was for people to come and sacrifice to God, offer their prayers, offer their repentance, right, as a means of worship and drawing closer to God, right? Well, for this big group of people, it had become a way of making money. Turned it in. That's why turned it from a house of prayer, right, into a den of robbers. Fortunately, today we don't have anybody involved in religion who's just there to make money.
Yeah. Did you get checked on that?
Yeah. But I digress. But so Jesus throws them out. But so for the people who are expecting him to come in and clean house, he's starting to clean house. Right? He's starting to clean house. Now, unfortunately, he's kind of cleaning the wrong house for them. They kind of wanted him to go over to the Praetorium, where Pilate was, and clear him out. Right? Whereas he's cleaning out more God's house. Right? But you got to start somewhere. Right? You got to start somewhere. So. In verse 14, then the blind and the lame came to him in the temple and he healed them. Now note this, because this is something that we don't necessarily have in our heads. Jesus didn't just come over there and throw everybody out, like to make a point, and then walk off and like they all set the tables back up. Okay? the gospel is telling us is that Jesus went in there, cleared those people out, and then he and his disciples and the people who came into town with him occupied the temple. Okay? They occupied the temple. They threw these people out and they stayed. Okay? And people are coming to be healed and coming to see Jesus from all over the city here in the temple. This again, for these original readers, they're kind of, oh, right? This is more leading to a confrontation. Now, this isn't necessarily so far, as long as it's just the temple, right? The Romans had agreed not to go into the temple because they're Gentiles, right? So they make it unclean. The Jews didn't want them there, right? So they're not going to get attacked by the Romans just yet. Right now, it's just the Jewish authorities, right? Who Jesus has now come in and occupied the temple. And so it's not surprising when, in verse 15, when the chief priests and scribes saw the wonderful things he did, right? Wonderful things meaning, literally, that's the translation of miracles. Right? They saw the miracles he was doing in the temple. And the children crying out in the temple and saying, Hosanna to the Son of David, they were indignant. Right? So he's in the middle of their territory, then he's coming, he's occupying. Right? You see him, he's healing all these people, and they're all proclaiming him to be the Messiah. Right? Verse 16, they said to him, do you hear what these are saying? Do you hear what they're saying? They're calling you the Messiah. Aren't you going to correct them? Right? Is the idea there. Right? Aren't you going to say anything? This is going to lead to trouble. Right? You come in here, you take over, now you got people running around saying you're the Messiah. We got Passover coming up. This is all going sideways. Right? Jesus said to them, yes, have you never read, out of the mouth of babes and nursing infants you have perfected praise? Then he left them and went out of the city to Bethany, and he lodged there. Okay. And if we won't go to it, we won't go to it now because we've already run on a little bit tonight. But if we look that up, in context, what that's talking about is it's contrasting the idea of the wise, the people who think themselves wise and who are ignorant of God, as opposed to infants worshiping God, right? God having revealed himself to the simple, right, in that quote. And so the point Jesus is making to the chief priests is very pointed, right? They say, aren't you going to say something to them? He's saying, yeah, they're right. They're telling the truth, that you, chief priests and scribes, you guys who are the ones who are in the know about religion, right? You missed the boat. You missed the boat. So he leaves the temple area with his disciples, goes out of the city to Bethany and lodges there. Verse 18, now in the morning as he returned to the city, he was hungry. So the picture here is, as we're coming into Holy Week now. Right? So that was just Sunday. Right? This is Monday. Now he's coming back into the city in the morning. So what Jesus is doing is he's staying in Bethany nearby, right? And then each day coming into the city of Jerusalem, right? And then going back out. In the morning as he returned to the city, he was hungry. And seeing a fig tree by the road, he came to it and found nothing on it but leaves, and said to it, let no fruit grow on you ever again. Immediately the fig tree withered away. When the disciples saw it, they marveled, saying, how did the fig tree wither away so soon? Right? Now a couple things here. We're going to get to what this represents. It's not just that God hates figs. Right? That's not the overarching theme. Right? Notice again, St. Matthew does everything he possibly can to show us how clueless the disciples are. How many things have they seen Jesus do by now? He just healed 2 blind people, like yesterday, And now a tree withers, and like, wow, that was a neat trick with the tree, Jesus. Like, right? So I mean, he's throwing this in to sort of go out of his way to say we were clueless, right? We did not get any of this, right? We were lost. Verse 21, so Jesus answered and said to them, assuredly I say to you, if you have faith and do not doubt, you will not only do what was done to the fig tree, but also if you say to this mountain, be removed and be cast into the sea, it will be done. And whatever things you ask in prayer, believing, you will receive. Now, that's kind of interesting. That's used in a different context in the other Gospels, that bit about the mountain, bringing up the mountain and throwing it into the sea. That sounds like Jesus is saying, you too can wither fig trees. Right? Again, not the point. The issue is, I think there might be something in the footnotes about this, but repeatedly, as we saw in the Old Testament, a fig tree was used as an image of Israel. As an image of Israel. So this isn't just Jesus was hungry, and when he's hungry, he's not himself. He eats a Snickers. This is, right? So he gets mad at trees and curses them, right? It's, poor tree, it's not his fault, right? Tree is a symbol, right? Tree is a symbol. It's a symbol of the city he's walking into. It's a symbol of the people who are dwelling there at the moment. And that is what? That is what? God brought them back from exile, right? From Cyrus. They rebuilt their cities, they rebuilt their towns, right? Because they were wanting to point out, yeah, they were being oppressed by the Romans, but remember how the Romans got there? As we saw in 1 Maccabees? They invited them, right? They invited them. They cut a deal with the Romans to protect themselves from the Greeks, right? And so the Romans ended up taking over. So that was on them. But so they've been planted here back in their land. Right? The land they wanted. God's planted them here. Right? Are they flourishing? Are they doing what God chose them to do? Right? Are the Romans walking into Judea and saying, wow, I have never been in a province like this? The people here live differently than anywhere I've ever been. They're so moral. They're so kind and loving. Right? We should become more like them and worship their God. Are any of the Romans doing? Right? No. Just like this tree, they've been planted there. Right? God planted them there. God gave them the rain. Right? God gave them the sun. Are they bearing any fruit? No. No. Because what St. Matthew is getting at here is that this elect status, this chosen status, right, is about to come to an end. It's about to come to an end. And we'll see more as we go on. Jesus is going to get even more explicit about it before the end of this chapter, which we probably won't get to tonight. But unfortunately. But we're going to read the next couple chapters in Holy Weeks. Right? You'll hear and get more explicit about it. That this is coming to an end. Right? God chose Israel for this purpose. Right? For this purpose. They haven't fulfilled it. They haven't done it. Right? They haven't done it. And so now, it'll be done. Right? They didn't do it. So that chapter, that old covenant, is over. Right? And Jesus is going to do what they failed to do. Right? Jesus is going to accomplish what they failed to do. And see, this is part of where our brothers and sisters in Christ who hold to a Zionist position on the scriptures don't get it. Because they're looking at this chosen status again the wrong way. They're looking at this chosen status as, oh, they're just special. God just loves them more than anyone else. Right? And as we've seen here already in these chapters, that's clearly not what that means. Right? They were chosen for a special purpose. Right? And as St. Paul is going to talk about it when we get into St. Paul's epistles, going with that special purpose for which they were chosen, they got all kinds of blessings and advantages that other nations didn't get. But those blessings and those advantages, when you don't fulfill the calling that God has given you, don't work in your favor. Right? They make you more responsible, right, than the other nations. When Israel and the Edomites behave in the exact same way, right? And Israel, unlike the Edomites, has received the law, the prophets, God's revelation, God's temple in the middle. Right? That means Israel is going to be more accountable. To be held more accountable. To be judged more severely than the Edomites. Because the Edomites didn't know any better. They didn't have any of those things. Right? And so that's what we're getting to here. As I said, we're not going to quite get to it where Jesus makes it fairly explicit. But this is the first image of that. This is the first image of that. Of him saying to Israel, you were called for this purpose, right? And you didn't do it. And so it's done. That doesn't mean the individual people, right? The individual Jewish people are somehow condemned. That means that that nation, that ethnicity, however you want to look at it, doesn't have any special status anymore. Right? St. Paul, again, when we get into Romans, especially 9 through 11, he's going to make that really clear. Right? He's going to say, it's not like all of Israel's cut off. St. Paul says, I'm Jewish. Right? He says, I'm Jewish. I believe in Christ. Right? So it's not all the individuals, right, who God's doing this with. Right? He still loves them just as much as he loves everyone else. But it's the special status for that nation because they didn't fulfill it. In the same way that if God calls you or I to some particular purpose, if God wants me to be the one to go and tell someone or some group of people about Christ, and I don't do it, he's not going to leave it undone. He's not going to leave it undone. He's going to send someone else, and then I'm going to answer for it on the day of judgment. Right? That's what this is saying. Right? God's not going to leave it undone. Christ is there to finish it. Right? Christ is there to do it. But this withering, this curse, is because the tree didn't do what it was put there to do. The tree didn't do what it was put there to do. Well, I hate to stop because we're not going to be able to have class for 3 weeks. We're not going to be able to have class for 3 weeks because we've got Palm Sunday and then Pascha. I'd love to go through all the way through the end of Matthew before, Pascha, but I don't think anybody wants to stay here till midnight. So I think this is a good place to stop. Even though it's the middle of the chapter. And we'll pick up here again in 3 weeks. Palm Sunday. So we've got bridegroom at night. And then it's Pascha, it's Easter the next week. So then the next week, Thomas Sunday night. We'll come back and pick up here. So thank you, everybody.
The Jews in America are saying they're the chosen people.
Right, because
But they're really not.
right, because it's a misunderstanding of what chosen means. And like I said, when we get into especially the book of Romans, that's basically what St. Paul is talking about for a big chunk of the epistle, is talking to the Jewish people who still say, oh, well, we're the chosen people, and him trying to say, well, yeah, but you were chosen for something, right? And you were chosen, and Christ is the fulfillment of what you were chosen for. So if you cut yourself off from Christ, you've cut yourself off from everything. Right? We get to the Gospel of John. Jesus is going to be really clear about that. He's just going to straightforwardly tell them, right, that if they knew God, the Father, they'd recognize him as the Messiah. So since they don't recognize him, that shows they don't know God at all. So you can't, you can't. The old covenant doesn't work no more. Right? It's old. It's dead. It's gone. Right? You can't go back to that. Right? And if you really understand the new covenant, you wouldn't want to. That's another one of St. Paul's themes. Is that if you really understand what the new covenant is, you wouldn't want to go back to the old covenant, the tassels on your robe and the not eating shrimp. Right? That shows that you don't get, how much greater what Christ did is than that. So, but we'll get there in the next few years. So, thanks again, everybody. Have a good Holy Week. Hopefully,